We know that bass will swim in all parts of the water column, right? It's very common. But when they are relating to the bottom more than the mid or more to the top areas, they seem to swim off of that bottom about the same distance pretty consistently. And this can be if they're relating to rock, mud, vegetation, wood, whatever it might be. They tend to be about that same distance or put that same amount of space between them and whatever that bottom composition is. Well, here is the part that is often overlooked. If there is stuff on the bottom, and usually this is going to be vegetation, it can create a secondary bottom or a false bottom that the bass will relate to. And if we are using bottom bouncing presentations where that lure is getting all the way to that lake bed, the distance between that lure and the bass could be a lot more or a lot greater than we think about. Now, this is very pronounced when we have really thick vegetation. In sparse vegetation, they will swim through it and then still relate to that actual bottom. So that's a huge difference between the two types of weeds that you might have in a body of water and where it positions the fish. Well, how does this impact our fishing? It's all about efficiency, right? We want those lures to be in the zone, in the right spot, being seen as much as possible. So if you have thicker vegetation or some sort of bottom composition that's creating that secondary layer, that second bottom, we want to try to keep our lures up there the best that we can. Often horizontal presentations are really good for this. You know, think of your small swim jigs, swim baits, these types of things. You can let it go down and tick the top of the vegetation, rip it out of there. If you have a very defined space between the surface and the top of that vegetation, any type of hard or soft jerk bait can work really well. Those are two of my absolute favorites. If you have some vegetation that's not quite as tall vertically, let's say chara, there's many lakes that have this in it, the drop shot or the power shot for fishing these types of situations. I like to use cylinder weights because they will slide through that grass better, won't hang up quite as much, and I can still feel where the top of that vegetation is, but I know or have confidence that my lure is probably sitting above it and is able to be seen almost 100% of the time. Another one is when we're using our Texas rigs or soft plastics, I like to put a plastic on there that has broader, wider appendages. Let's say a craw, for example. It is more apt to catch the top of that vegetation and sit right there on it where bass can see it and can pick it off of the top easier than something that is a little slender and drops way down into that stuff and completely disappears. Remember, we want to keep our lures in the zone, the part of the water column that they're using, as long as possible, making them as visible as possible. And when we're faced with these types of lake or riverbeds, it's so easy to put our lures out there, think they're doing the job, but most of the time they can't even be seen, or they are so buried up in stuff that they aren't working as efficiently as we would like them to be, because we are targeting on that actual lake or riverbed as opposed to that secondary bottom that could be 1, 2, 3, 4 feet or more higher above it. And speaking of swimming through and over the top of vegetation, if you want to watch a video that talks about something we can add to our soft plastics that can really increase that distance that bass can see the lure, go ahead and check this one out right here. And make sure that you go out and encourage someone today. You never know how you might just change their life. For the Bass Fishing Life, I'm your host, Steve Rogers.